host, Vanessa Kaiser, and I am so excited to be here with you today. Have you ever found yourself asking the question, how can I help? Both when great things happen, like babies are born or new houses are bought, but also when tragedy strikes, when someone passes away, or there's a world crisis, like what's going on in Ukraine. And it's often in those types of situations where I find myself going, what can I do to help here? Serving others has been a passion of mine since I was little. It's just the way that God built my heart. And I think I mentioned this in the first podcast episode, but my parents are both very generous people and have always shown a great deal of hospitality and neighborliness to people that they've come in contact with. Their house has always been a place where people know that they are always, always welcome. So I think that my love for serving and my attention to it really stems from the example that I had from my parents. I also spent the first half of my career working in the nonprofit parachurch ministry sector, where I was consistently presenting opportunities for others to serve those people in our community who were in need. And so service has really been naturally just a part of my life since I was little, from the influence of my parents and my grandparents up until adulthood, with the influence of the church and my work. When I was sitting reflecting on today's podcast episode, this was not the episode we were dropping today. This was not the plan. This wasn't in the schedule. But as I considered what is going on in our world and the heaviness of the things that we're seeing in the news about Ukraine, I just feel like we needed to pause. We need to talk about this. We need to talk about it because so many people are asking the question, what can I do to help? Hear me when I say this is not going to be a political podcast episode. We are not getting into the details of any of that, but I really do want to talk to you about what it looks like to serve our people and what it looks like to serve our community and our church, and also what about the people around the world. I want to start by talking about how we serve our people. That would be the people in our nuclear circle who have experienced tragedy or crisis. This is definitely not a part of my story that I talk about very often, but for the sake of this conversation, I think it's important to share with you that I have experienced what feels like to me a lot of loss in my life. I lost a best friend right after we graduated from high school. I've lost all of my grandparents and some honorary grandparents. I've also lost uncles, and I've watched friends who have suffered the loss of people that they care very much about. And while I have walked through this grief, what feels like so many times, I've learned some things. The Lord is gracious that way, right? He teaches us things in the midst of really, really hard circumstances. And so here's some things I've learned about grief. It looks different every time. And the healing process is forever long. And I do mean forever. I think we still grieve the loss of people that we loved forever. I don't think it ever ends, honestly. It changes over time, but I think ultimately it never goes away. I've also learned that the emotions and the roller coaster of those things that you experience on the front end of grief can be daunting, and they can feel confusing at times, and they can also be a lot to handle. So I know that we're not talking about how to handle grief, but I do think when we're thinking and considering coming alongside our people, those in our nuclear circle who are suffering from crisis or tragedy, that we have to make sure that our hearts are in a good place, that we are not neglecting to deal with the emotions that we too are experiencing as we're coming alongside them. So Psalm 34:18 says, "The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirit." So I just encourage you, if you are walking alongside someone that you love who's in a really tough spot, to encourage them with this verse, but also to know that as you are processing your own stuff as it relates to their situation, God is near to you. He loves you. You can be angry, and He's okay with that. He can handle it. You can be emotional and sad. You can be confused. You can not understand. And the Lord's got you. He's got you, friend. All right. So you are ensuring that you are processing your own emotions, that you are not just shoving things down, but that you're acknowledging the grief and the sadness that comes when tragedy strikes. And then we can move on to the next thing, which is to observe and to ask what needs to be done. This is like a normal human reaction, I think, that when something bad happens, we want to help. And typically, because we can't necessarily make someone not sad, especially when like it's a really big crisis or tragedy that's occurring, we want to physically help, right? We want to cook food. We want to clean houses. We want to get the car washed and the oil changed. Like we want to physically help you. We want to alleviate any burden that our people might be experiencing. It's a natural reaction. And you know what? It's beautiful. I think it's the way that the Lord made us to serve one another. And so it's a really, really positive thing. But speaking from experience, something that can be incredibly overwhelming is that when you are experiencing grief or hard things, tragedy of any kind, and someone is consistently bombarding you with like, what do you need? What do you need? What do you need? What do you need? And sometimes you're like, oh my gosh, enough. Like, I don't need anything. I'm fine. Thanks for asking. But the reality is like, yeah, these chores still need to get done. Yeah, I still need to feed my kids, right? The car still does need gas. There are things that still have to happen for life to continue to move forward. So I encourage you to read the room a little bit. Pay attention, observe, look around. What needs done? And sometimes in the midst of hard things, we feel from the outside like we don't want to overstep, we don't want to interfere. But I would say that we live in one of the most individualistic cultures here in America and in a lot of places around the world today. But in our country, a long, long time ago, people were much more communal in nature. So don't be weird about going into your friend's house and doing laundry. If you've never met the person, that might be a little weird, okay? But if it's your friend, if it's your people, and that's who we're talking about right now, right? Your nuclear circle people experiencing hard things, go do their laundry. You know what? They'll appreciate it. And they'll probably only find it weird the first time. If you can't see anything that needs done, then the next step is to ask and to make a genuine extension for help, right? I love you. I'm here for you. I will literally do anything. Can I do your laundry? Can I go fill up your car with gas? Can I bring you food? Can I take your kids for the evening? Ask. Now, I want to zoom out and talk about how we respond to crisis and tragedy in our communities and around the world. There are so many hurts in our world. So many. There are people living in material poverty who haven't eaten for 5 days. There are kids languishing in the foster care system who are 12, 13, 14 years old, and the trauma that they experienced at the hands of their biological parents was so intense that it has changed their brain and it has made their behaviors seem out of control for families. And there are refugees that are fleeing war-torn countries in hopes that, if not their life, the life of their children will be spared. Where do you start? There's so much hurt. There's so much pain. And we want to do it all, right? I want to save all of those kids. I want to feed all of those people. I want all of those refugees to feel what it means to be at home again, to be safe, to not worry. But we can't. I wish we could. I wish I had better news for you. And that can be hard to sit with if we're honest. We want to do it all. We do. But you know what? That's why we are the body of Christ. Some of us are the hands, others are the feet, some are the head, some are the heart. That's what the church is for, and that's the beauty of it. So pause. Ask yourself, what is God breaking my heart for? What matters the most to me? What season am I in my life? And what does that mean for what my availability is, both of my time and of my resources? Doing an honest assessment of those things is going to help you make a good decision about what you can do to serve. Oftentimes, when we're talking about serving people who are in crisis, either in our community or globally, we are talking about linking arms with organizations that are already in the trenches. They're doing the work, they know the needs, and they're able to deploy both financial and people resources to help get those needs met. I would encourage you, when you are considering linking arms with an organization, that you just take a second to pause, read their mission statement, look at their board of directors, look at all of the programs that they are providing, and just make sure that what you think they do is what they actually do, and that you align with their mission statement and what they are all about. It's important that you don't jump into an organization to then later find out, oh shoot, that's not like we're not actually on the same page. They do things differently than what I thought, or they're not doing what I thought we were going to actually be doing. So pause on the front end to save yourself and the organization the headache and the heartache of unmet expectations. And finally, you have to decide how you can and will help. And part of this decision comes from naming your season. We talked about this 2 weeks ago. Without knowing your capacity to give of your time and your resources, deciding how you can help is going to be a struggle. And I just want to take pause here for a second and talk to you about this, because as someone who worked at a nonprofit parachurch ministry where I was consistently recruiting volunteers, it is really hard to recruit volunteers who then you cannot rely on, because you put the work into them to get them ready to serve. And then when they're consistently unavailable to you and to the people that are in need, that can be super frustrating. And it's not just frustrating, but it's also really taxing, and it can prohibit the movement of the ministry forward. So I would really encourage you to pause and really take inventory and go, do I have time to offer here? And not just, I'm feeling bad today. I heard a sermon about serving and now I need to step up my game, or I seen this emotional plea on Facebook and now I need to step up my game. But I actually haven't thought this all the way through. I haven't looked at my calendar. I haven't talked to Jesus about it. I haven't talked to my spouse about it. But yeah, I'll sign up for that. In reality, in 2 weeks, when life really hits again, this is not the season for me to be saying yes to that particular thing in that way. So don't be guilted into it by conversation, by social media, but let the Lord do the convicting on your heart. So don't just be complacent. Don't just say no for the sake of saying no. Take inventory, take pause, but also make sure that your yes is not coming from a place of guilt or emotional response, but is actually coming from a place of ability to follow through, a calling into the thing you're saying yes, and the willingness and discipline and availability to follow through on your commitment. Thanks for hanging in there through the heavy stuff. Now let's talk about the rest of life. When life is just moving along, and when it's maybe exciting or joyful. There's a mixture here again of practical and heart things that we can do to serve our people well. For example, the next time that you are meal prepping, get out an extra package of meat, an extra can of vegetables, and make a casserole and put it in the freezer and write the date on it. You might not even know or have an idea at that moment who that casserole might go to. But as your weeks go, I bet you'll have a good idea of someone who could use it, right? Someone who comes down with a cold, someone who had a busy week at work, someone who just had a baby. Maybe you know them super well. Maybe you've met them at church once, but regardless, you have an opportunity to serve and you're already ready. You're already prepared. And if we're being honest, that's half the battle. We have been having a lot of conversations in our home about time and serving in the last couple of months. And so often it feels like there are some weeks where you're really just like not sure how to do any more things. You're like, I think I could do more if I got up at maybe 4 a.m. Um, but otherwise, from the time I wake up to the time I go to bed, my schedule is literally packed. And on those weeks when someone comes down with a cold, you're like, I'm not sure how to fit in making a casserole right now. Um, so yeah, it's just not going to happen. Um, and that's okay. That's totally okay. But sometimes we do have the opportunity to be prepared ahead of time when we have an extra few minutes. And those extra few minutes can be a huge blessing to our people. We've already talked a little bit about serving in the way of mundane tasks, laundry, dishes, vacuuming, grocery running. And I know that sometimes that feels awkward and it's not our tendency, but I just have to pause here again and say, we all need undies, people. We all do. So we just need to make sure that our heart is postured in such a way where we have a willingness to help in whatever needs to be done, whether it's laundry or something more exciting like baking a 7-course meal for dinner, right? So don't be afraid to get your hands dirty in the mundane. And now for the hard stuff. Anytime that there is joy and excitement, it can also potentially come with stress. Think about it. You have a baby. It's like one of life's biggest blessings. Also, if you're a first-time mom or seventh-time mom, your baby's still not going to sleep through the night for quite some time. You're still going to be sleep deprived. Your house is still going to go through an adjustment as you go through an adjustment into motherhood for the first or the fifth time. And your body is going through adjustments. So we have to acknowledge that with the joy, the pure blessing that that baby is, there's also some hard stuff behind it. There's also some emotions, some hormones, and it is okay to lean into them. And I would even argue it's not just okay, it's necessary. Serving our people well comes with sitting in the hardness of joy and excitement. Moving to a new home or accepting a new job is the exact same thing. There's all this stress of the unknown, of packing, of moving, of disappointing people. And so we need to make sure that as we're serving our people, as we're coming alongside of them, that we're really creating space for them to process through both their excitement and anticipation and the stress that they might be feeling. I would say here again, in an attempt to be really transparent, that sometimes this can be awkward if this isn't like your best friend, right? Let's say that this is someone, again, from your circle and you know them, but you're not besties and you haven't hung out. And maybe you haven't had a lot of deep conversations. And then you're like, how are your hormones doing after having a baby? I get it. So read the room, be cautious, but also I would say be bold because sometimes we just need someone to ask and then we need them to listen. And that's all we need. That simple act goes a long way, both in filling our hearts as someone who might be going through stress, but then also to build connectivity and relationship amongst us. All right, serving in our world and community when tragedy has not necessarily occurred, there's not a crisis going on, but you feel like God is breaking your heart for something and you are ready to dig in. The same sentiments that we talked about earlier apply. You need to make sure that you're asking yourself what season that you're in. What time commitment can you make right now? And then maybe even consider asking, who do I know who is connected to the service that I'm interested in? Sometimes knowing people in the field can really, really help you to make a good decision about the organization that you serve, and can also help you when you come across things that maybe don't make sense to you or are difficult. And you can be encouraged by someone who's already walked that path and is already doing those things. As we get ready to wrap up today, I just want to talk to you about some key principles from our conversation together. First, it is good to be prepared to help people. And it is good to have a heart postured to want to serve people when life's unexpected blessings and tragedy occur. And oftentimes, this service requires sacrifice of our own time, money, resources, comfort. And that is totally okay. It's not even okay. It's amazing. It's good. In the same breath, and this is really an and, not a but. The whole put your own oxygen mask on first thing really applies here. Sacrifice for others is needed, and it is God honoring. But neglecting your own family's needs is not going to put you in a position to be very helpful. If you think about the oxygen mask thing, the whole principle behind that is if you aren't getting oxygen and it takes you too much time to put the oxygen mask on your kid or your mom or your dad or your spouse, then you're going to not be able to breathe and you'll pass out. And then when you're passed out, you're worth nothing because you can't do anything when you're passed out. The same thing with serving applies. If we neglect our own needs, our family's needs, the needs of our household, to serve others, at some point we're going to pass out. And generally, the people who get the shortest end of that stick are our families. So don't neglect them. God has given them to you to treasure, to serve. So serve them well, so you can then turn around and serve your people well. Be open in communication with your spouse, with your kids, with yourself, with God, and be prayerful. Okay, friends, as we end our time together, I just want to take a second to tell you what's been inspiring me this week. So my husband and I are part of a small group that meets every other week from our church, and we have been meeting with this particular group of people since the fall. And they have been a huge blessing to us. And this last time that we were together, we were talking about how do we move from just serving one another to doing life together. This is a really foreign concept in our country because we are very, very independent people here in America. And so the idea of calling someone and saying, hey, I have to go run groceries. Do you want to come? Or someone just popping into my house unexpectedly without calling or texting to say hi, to bring pizza, to check in, who maybe needs to sit and chat with me about something. That's a really foreign concept, and it feels a little intrusive and like weird. And at the same time, it feels so beautiful. It feels so desirable. I we've been talking about just like the desire for deep community, and deep community is only built over time. And that was really the head of the conversation, is that time feels crunched. And you can evaluate your life and you can have people telling you that if your life is too busy to make time for community, then it's too busy. And that's fair, except sometimes you're looking at your life going, I'm not sure what to cut out. I'm not sure. I'm working and I'm serving at church and serving my spouse, my kids, my family. Where do I make time? How do I make time? And I think we think that because we think what time looks like is one more meeting a week, one more outing, one more time when I'm not going to be home with my kids or my husband. When actually, what building community could look like is, hubby and I are going to the grocery store. Do you want to come? Hey, I'm coming over because I miss you. I haven't seen you all week. Friend, here's a meal. And I would love it if you would go take a nap while I did your laundry because I know that you're tired. It's weird, but it is so beautiful. And I have been just really, really spending some time thinking about that and going, how do we open our hearts and our homes so that we are someone who build community that way? Because we want it. We do. We want it. All right, friends, take a moment and think about what's been inspiring you this week. As always, don't forget to subscribe to the Inspiring Heights podcast so that you never miss an episode. You can also like and follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Inspiring Heights. And check us out at inspiringheights.org. Click on the podcast link. On the right-hand side, you'll see a button underneath a mountain image where you can submit ideas for the podcast that you would like to hear us talk about. All right, friends, until next time, take a deep breath and be inspired where your feet are. Bye for now.